Okay, hey class. Today we're going to be covering toxic masculinity in the form of like the Gillette ad. Um, Members of our group, we have Chloe, we have me, Devin, we have Shelby, Brianna, and Alex. All right, so a little bit of background about toxic masculinity in general. Um, bef as a preface to like the actual definition of toxic masculinity, which is sort of like upholding these um, traditions that sort of see men as like the more dominant force. Advertising has supported this, especially when they're advertising to like a more man-centric base, and they really like emphasize like a hegemonic portrayal of masculinity. With heterosexuality, sexism being like key to this, like really emphasizing like the straight male urge and all that, like with women, and the sexism, so seeing women as being like subservient, as being like these objects of affection. And these advertisements and like this mentality really like hone in on this idea that good guys don't rape. And this is kind of built upon by like the myths that our culture has kind of like brought up, like the stranger myth, where we assume that rapists are like not associated with the person, like the victim who they attack, like they don't know them, or the victim doesn't know them, and so they're kind of detached from the whole thing, which is why they're able to do it. Then we've got like the monster myth, which kind of brings this idea that there's just these people in society who like get some type of pleasure from like forcing themselves onto women, and that's like how they get their sexual gratification, or they're just like so repulsive and like socially unacceptable that they really only can get like sex by forcing themselves onto women. And so even like the black male rapist myth kind of brings back the idea of like, oh, it's this person, especially back then when like, segregation and civil inequality was like really, really bad. It was kind of this idea of like the people on the lower end of society are doing this to people on the higher end to sort of try to get like this power, this authority, to try to like satiate their urges because they just can't control them like normal members of society. And they like these built up this idea that good guys don't rape because only monsters do. Like only these really extreme examples of people actually go through with the act of like raping someone. So it kind of ties in with this ad where we take a step back from, oh, good guys don't do that. Good guys don't rape. They don't have to. They don't need to because they are sufficiently masculine, because they're already dominant over women. So they don't have to force themselves on women to like prove that. So this ad kind of takes a step back and is like, no, all men have to kind of like take accountability and try to stop the big cultural issue we have of like how women are viewed and what male traits are like deemed as acceptable. Got a little quote to lead us into the video. The ways scholarship and activism have tended to address men as those who perpetrate sexual violence against women as those who must be taught to not rape may lead some of the complicated ways in which sexual violence and masculinity are intertwined. Okay. So that ad obviously had a really like impactful message to society, but Gillette is also a business. And so they kind of had to factor that into their decision making in going forward with this ad. Prior to it, their stock had been steadily declining. Gillette had kind of been facing a few business setbacks. They had a change of management in about like 2017, 2018. Um, in addition to that, they've been struggling for a while to reach a new, younger clientele. They've been trying to figure out how they can properly advertise to like this younger generation of men who are going to be using their products, hopefully, for the duration of their life. Because right now, their user base is like on the older side. It's people who are going to be customers, like loyal, but for only so long because they're getting up in age. And so this ad is it kind of serves as an attempt to reach like that younger audience, trying to go into tackling modern issues. And we'll kind of discuss in a little bit how that is like a new advertising method to try to get more attention. The ad also includes a little, clip of a previous Gillette ad because it is trying to show how far it's come in that it, just like at large, hasn't always been on the right side of things, that it hasn't always kind of emphasized how important it is to respect women and then also to not like feed into these toxic male traits that kind of dictate how people should be or how men should behave or what they should want out of relationships or how they should treat each other. So speaking of kind of this wave of ads that, of course, Nike had the really impactful Colin Kaepernick ad, which kind of tackled police brutality. It came before this one, and it faced a lot of like backlash. It had a lot of negativity thrown at it. People were very, very upset with Nike for making this ad. They had social media posts and people just like throwing their Nike products away, burning their Nike products at time, had a very like negative reaction to this. And in spite of that, Nike's, or I guess because of that, Nike's website traffic actually increased a lot. More people were looking Nike up, more people were going to their website, seeing what products they had, and their stock increased. People believed in Nike more after this. They believed that they were a successful business. Their name got out there even more. And it kind of worked for them. Nike had a really nice business boom from doing something so controversial. And it kind of brought this idea that, like, yes, we can use these divisive issues, we can bring awareness, but we can also bring new customers to our base. And it brought up this balance sort of how much we're going to buy into these social issues and how much we want to be activists and how much that can positively impact us as a company. And so obviously it would be very difficult to kind of look at Gillette and just see them as doing this completely altruistically when there's precedent that this is like a good business move if the risk and reward aligns in that way. Old Spice also kind of had a moment of doing this. In an older ad they marketed towards women who would buy their husband's, products. Like it, and it worked really well. It really like started helping Old Spice get more business because instead of going for men who, liked their products but wouldn't buy them simply because they wouldn't do the shopping, it went for the women who would do the shopping, who would go and get these products, who would like compare them and see their value or really like the ad and how it was like coming at them. And so it kind of brought in this idea of maybe you don't have to target your like user base so much as you have to target the people who are going to buy your product in the end. This is obviously something Gillette probably also factored in because a fifth of like male razor products are purchased by women. So it's like that's a pretty big chunk of their base that they can really like advertise directly to by going with this movement that is trying so hard to not only tell men to like correct their behavior, but also to do so to help women who've been constantly affected by it. So with these two previous examples, it kind of helps build the idea of why Gillette would take such a risk, because you'd think going against going against their fan base so much would be like business suicide, but it actually could really like pan out and help them get out of this sort of like negative spiral they've been on previously. Um, Gillette, before this, their sort of like campaign was the best a man can get, you know. It really focused on the men who would get the products. It was like, look your best so that you can sort of do what you always intended to do. It was sort of like, we're going to help you like look the part of being masculine. We're going to help you get to that so that you can then go and do these masculine things, so that you can go and you can get women, so you can, you know, hang out with the guys, all that sort of stuff. And they did it as a Super Bowl ad, which is a predominantly male watched event. You know, they very much focused on men. So them changing it to the best a man can be, them shifting this from being so male centric to like including the fact that like including women, and not just in like an objectifying manner, but actually including like they should be treated with respect, showing that men, you know, not just emphasizing like, oh, they're right, like this will help you, you know, achieve this masculine standard, but questioning the masculine standards that have already been in place. This was huge, and it really showed them like really fully going into the Me Too movement. It was a very big risk. It was calculated in a sense. And in doing so, they sort of alienated their older audience who was not very fond of the Me Too movement, who was not very fond of Colin Kaepernick's, you know, police brutality ad. People who kind of don't buy into these newer movements, these new ideas of what society should look like. But the risk could have turned out really well. And we'll discuss later on in this presentation how it kind of worked out for Gillette.
Okay, so I will now cover some of the backlash that Gillette received after the ad. There was widespread backlash. It was mainly panned, the ad campaign, including on the video itself on YouTube, receiving over 1.6 million dislikes, becoming one of the most disliked videos on YouTube. And this caused a lot of people to try to boycott Gillette, starting a hashtag where they posted pictures of them throwing away their products, kind of like some of the backlash received with Nike. And they received this backlash for a variety of reasons. One of the reasons can be seen in the tweet on the slide itself, where it talks about how it makes men feel by basically male audience members found the ad accusatory and felt like they're being accused of upholding and perpetuating these negative aspects of masculinity. And, you know, it's not very helpful to a lot of people to be accused when you're trying to get them to follow your message. Instantly calling them out as the perpetrators can really not come across in a productive manner. And also another reason why it kind of failed was because the way the Gillette video, it represented a right type of masculinity, and it put out an explicit call to join the brand in an action against the wrong masculinity. And it directed the audience to see themselves as a part of a movement, as one people under the leadership of Gillette. So basically, if you didn't support Gillette or you didn't support their product or things, people, they're putting you as like the wrong kind of masculinity, even if you yourself, a lot of men were like, I don't do these things, so why am I being accused of perpetuating these things if it's not me? They kind of missed the point of it being a larger systemic issue and just felt more personally attacked than seeing it as a large scale issue. So after the advertisement was released, sales dropped and Gillette had to be bailed out and given $8 billion to stay afloat. But regardless of the backlash, the CEO, Jerry Combe, believes that their advertisement was necessary to create the very much needed dialogue centered around the toxicity of masculinity in our society and advertisement as a whole.
Okay, so some of the positive outcomes we've kind of already talked about. They were able to just kind of open up the floor to have this conversation that was needed. So one of the sources that we read was called It's On Us, and they talked about the role of social media and just media in terms of like news and things and how that affects people's willingness to like join in on movements. So one of the key things they talked about was this concept of the spiral of silence. So basically, people who have like differing opinions from the larger majority are less likely to like voice those opinions unless they feel like unless they feel like the dominant opinion is not supported strongly or that their own opinion is gaining support, then they're more likely to voice it. So basically, people voicing their opinion is all about their perception of what's like in and popular, which is influenced a lot by mass media and like what we choose to present to individuals. So a person's willingness to mobilize in collective action against sexual assault, so join in on movements, they found that male participation in sexual violence movements is higher when men are sensitized to the problem, meaning we should make sexual assault not just an issue for women, but like an overall community concern if we want more men to be involved. So they posited that media attention to the issue of sexual assault increases mobilization. So you would think that Gillette, you know, kind of talking about the issue and saying, hey guys, like we are a part of this too, they wouldn't have received as much backlash. If anything, it should have been a more positive outcome for them, but they kind of saw the opposite. So they also found that sexual violence is more of a concern to women, which kind of goes along with that myth that like men can't get raped. Men are more passive in their opposition to sexual violence and are less likely to engage in collective action. Therefore, men should be specifically targeted as potential audience in these campaigns. So I'm thinking maybe this is the reason why Gillette decided to target their audience in this way. I think it was needed. It just wasn't taken the best way. So another example of this, the White House put out an It's On Us campaign in which they kind of focus on including everyone in the conversation, not just women, and focusing on bystander intervention, consent education, and survivor support. So I put in like a little video of like something they've put out. It doesn't really have to go with toxic masculinity, but so it just kind of shows again some of the myths we talked about in class, with the whole like she wanted it type of conversation. So yeah, their goal is once again to just include everyone in the conversation and like shift away from it always being the woman's fault or the victim's fault, and showing that everyone can play a role in the prevention.
So in conclusion, the Gillette ad challenged the long history of toxic masculinity in advertising by challenging men to do better in combating these societal problems. And while the Jet ad might have ultimately fallen short and received backlash in challenging toxic masculinity, it is evocative of a larger trend in society towards more progressive portrayals of masculinity and more awareness around toxic masculinity and rape culture as a whole.
So this is just a list of the sources that we either used in this presentation or in our paper. That's all we have. Thank you.